How y'all doing? I'm not gonna try to be too long. Today, tonight, I want to talk to y'all about how to beat any court case. Now, some of you may know, some of you may not know, but most of my Morris brothers and sisters, they know. However, I want to talk to y'all about how to beat any court case. It's two sides to you, right? You have a personal side and you have a private side. But normally when you're dealing with like courtrooms and public politicians and figures like, polices and, etc., right? You're dealing with the public. But to avoid yourself from contracting with, these peoples, whether they judges, polices, any public official, you always want to stay private, right? And most of us know what private is. Private is the part of you that's personal, that you don't share with everybody else. And the public part of you is when you don't mind sharing whatever you feel you need to share when you mingling with the public. Because there's going to be times you're going to have to know how to switch, how to come out your private self into your public self. But no matter what, you only come out your private self to deal with the public when it's beneficial and necessary. Other than that, you always want to stay private. So this is how you dismiss a case in a courtroom. I don't dismiss so many of them. I can't even count how many. I don't did so many. But for those of you new, even if you don't understand what I'm saying, I'm going to try to break it down as usual and make it simple if I could. If you got to play the video back, it'd probably be better that you do that too. But with that said, I was trying to give people a chance to get in. I know it's kind of late, but as I always say, get your pens and your pad and take notes if necessary. But be sure to listen very well. When you go into the courtroom, let me give you an example. Whatever they accusing your person of, it don't matter what the subject matter is. Guns, drugs, traffic. It don't matter what it is. They gonna name off the charges, right? They gonna call up the name, and then the judge gonna ask you how you plead. But one thing you don't want to do, you don't want to step outside your private capacity. You want to stay private. So, for instance, use myself as an example. If I was in the courtroom and whatever my person was being charged with, and they called my name like Alexander West, please step up to the thing. You don't even have to step up there. You don't have to step into their jurisdiction. You can actually speak from sitting down. But it really doesn't matter. If you step up to the podium, you better know what you're saying if you ain't got no lawyer to represent you. And even if you got a lawyer to represent you, you got to understand and realize the lawyer still work for the courts, right? So, me, myself, I go as I am. So, first thing I would say, they call out the charges, they call out the case, they call out the name that I represent. I step up there and I say, for the record, Your Honor, I do not consent to jurisdiction. I am here in proper persona and not in pro se, and I waive no rights. What they're saying is you represent yourself in person and first in blood and your interests, right? The entity, the person that they claim that committed the crime, right? That's what you represent. And that's why you're there on that behalf, right? So you making that clear for the record, right? So because if you got an attorney representing you, see the court know. A lot of people don't know. It don't matter how expensive the attorney is. Trust me, but believe. Because I've been in front of the judge so many times and I've paid thousands, 30, 20, thousands trying to get the lawyer to represent me and realizing, I learned later that the lawyer first priority and opens to the courts, right? So that's why sometimes some of us, end up in the position we're in because the lawyer be working with the court, and you at the same time, but you not aware of it, because that's their first oath, is to the court. But let me get back on the subject. Then the next thing you want to say, I am the living benefit and the exclusive, the executor of the trust and the state named in this matter. What you saying is you own that person. Whatever the person they claim to committed the crime or being accused or whatever, you represent that person. You there to speak on their behalf for that person or that entity, right? And reason why you saying you there to speak on that person, that entity, because the person that they're accusing of the crime, right? It's not a real person, right? It's an entity. It's a person that's acting on behalf of yourself, right? If other words, like my name is Alexander West, right? So the crime is being they accusing Alexander West as a crime. Somebody or somewhere, something, right, doing something or contracting with them or breaking the law, whatever the case is, right? So most of us think that they got to be you. But see, that's two different persons, right? Them two different peoples. Because the person they accusing Alexander West as they're accusing of the crime, he spelled his name in all capital letters. A-L-E, capital A, capital L, capital E, capital S, capital A, capital N, capital D, capital E, capital R, capital W, capital E, capital S, capital T. But see, me, the only capital is my first letter of my first name. Only capital is A. The L-E-X-A-N-D-R is all lowercase letter. And the same thing with the last name, West. The only thing capital is a W. And the E-S-C is lowercase number. So that right there lets you know that we're not the same person. We're not the same entity, right? Even though the name is spelled different, spell the same, but the only difference is, the capital and the small letters. But anything different, make it different. It don't matter if it's a comma. It don't matter if the last name was first. It don't matter. Any little thing that you don't spell your name that way, make the names different. If they make the names different, they make the people different. They make the people different, that mean they can't be talking about you, right? So you is not being charged anything. They charging the peoples who you represent of a crime, right? And that person is an all capital letter person who got that ID. If you put out your ID, you'll see that all the letters are capitals. You put out your credit card, you'll see that all the letters are capital. If you put out your license, you'll see all the letters are capital. That's not you. That's who you represent. And the reason why all the letters are capitals, and that's not true, because we are dealing with commerce, right? So I'm only able to do business, right? To mingle in this world and do when you're dealing with commerce, right? You can't do it in private. You can't do it as yourself. You know what I mean? So the only way to be able to mingle from private to public, you have to act on behalf of that entity, right? That's why everywhere you go, the first thing they're going to say to you, do you have an ID, sir? Do you have a social security card, sir? Do you have a driver's license, sir? Because it's not about a person. It's about a number, right? And that number represents that entity, right? And that entity is owned by the government. It's official. It don't exist, right? So anytime you claiming to be that entity, you is giving them jurisdiction, over your body and your person to do whatever they feel fit according to their rules, regulations, and their laws, right? So you want to always stay private, right? And you want to stay out of public, right? And what they said, now, number 3, you'll say, let the record show there is no verified, right, living injured party present. No injured party equals no jurisdiction, right? So what you letting them know is, if they making a claim on my person, this Alexander West, even though it's not me, and this is the entity I represent, because I own him, I control him. So everything that he owns belongs to me. He don't have anything. He only exists because of me, through me. So if I don't ever bring him alive, he don't exist. You see what I mean? So what you asking the courts, when you saying that, when you telling them, you say, when you saying, okay, if there's no injured party, there's no jurisdiction, right? So what you really asking them is, in order to be a criminal crime, right? And you're dealing with criminal law. So you're dealing with law. So if you're dealing with a court of law, that means you was in a common law courtroom. So you dealing with criminal law. That means it has to be an accuser, it has to be a witness, right? And it has to be an injured party, right? So you standing in front of the judge, and they bringing up all these different charges and all these different accusations. No matter how bad it sounds, they can be talking about, well, he shot this and he had all these drugs, he had all this and that. Stay private. Never get caught up in what they saying and what they naming. Because anytime you start focusing and you start speaking on what they're accusing your person of, you consent to the contract, right? And you giving them jurisdiction over the person, right? And that you never want to do that, right? So the first thing you want to do, you know what I mean? The first thing you want to do, you want to remove the liability. Because whatever they claiming that entity done, the person that you represent or they're accusing of doing, what you want to do now is let them know where I'm not paying for it, and I don't agree to them doing it, and I'm not consenting to it doing it. So unless you can prove to me that it committed these things, these crimes or whatever, I'm not consenting to getting you consent to rule in your favor towards this entity or this subject. Now, I hope I'm not losing y'all when I say any other subject. I'm still talking about Alexander West, but I'm talking about the Alexander West who they talking about, right? I'm not talking about myself, right? The Alexander West, they talking about the all capital letters that we carry around in our pockets, right? That's the person we act on behalf. That's who we represent. That's not us. You see what I mean? That belongs to the state. That was made by the state. That person was created by the state, and that person belongs to the states. So they own the rights and the jurisdiction to that person. So you don't ever want to be that person. You want to always stay private and be yourself. I hope I'm not losing y'all. But to come to the end, you want to make it clear you the executor and the grantor, right? And I administratively reject and assume liability. I do not consent to being a surety. Saying that you're not going to let them use that person to get some type of finance or Federal Reserve or negotiable instruments from you, from something they claim that they done or they consent to, that you don't agree with or have no knowledge of, to it doing, right? Because you got to understand, remember, you're in control of the person, right? The entity, the Alexander West that you keep in your wallet. You control that person, so you know if that person did anything or not, right? So you ain't gonna never admit to it doing that because you ain't never know it doing that. First of all, how can something that don't exist commit a crime, right? So that's one thing. So you got to understand when you're dealing with laws, right? When you're dealing with courts, you're dealing with words, right? It's all words. It's wording. So you got to know what they saying when they start speaking about the word. You don't want to get caught up and get lost, and you don't want to give them jurisdiction over your body. So with that said, with not nobody being there, right, and you just stand in front of the judge, and you got the prosecutor arguing on the court's behalf or the state behalf of why that person should be paying this fine or locked up or whatever the case is, right? So with nobody else there, just the prosecutor, you and the judge, it's almost like whoever can act the best. That's who always come out there ahead, right? Who can sell the best lie, the best story. That's what it really come down to, right? So with that said, because there's nobody there making the claim but the prosecutor, right? So you want to say, if there's no living claimant or contract exists, I motion that this subject matter be dismissed for failure to state a claim. And what contract exists, I motion that this subject matter be dismissed for failure to state a claim. And what that's saying is this. All that's saying is this. I want y'all to listen close, because you can be any case in court, what I'm telling you. Any case. You don't need no lawyer. You don't need a lot of money. You don't need any of that. All you got to do is understand the laws and understand the wording, right? And always stay in your private capacity. That's all you got to do, right? So what it was saying that you motion that the case be dismissed, right? For failure to claim relief, right? That means that the courts always, right? It is the law that the court must always give you a way where you can where relief is given, right? They must give you a way out, a way to defend yourself, right? A way to resolve the subject matter, right? They must give you a way to right or wrong, right? So if it ain't nobody there, no injured party, right? And if it's not no witness, right? And ain't nobody there to accuse that person or that entity, right? Well, how can a judge preside in a hearing, right? Where there's nobody there to make the claim, right? For the judge to preside is to violate the oath of office, right? Because he or she is not giving you nowhere where release can be granted, right? So to break it down, because I know it's still kind of complicated. To break it down, because I know it's still complicated. I'm gonna give y'all an example or one of the cases that I did when I went in front of the judge, and I did it like 15 or more. I don't know how many times, but I never lost a case. One time I went in front of the judge, right? I had a court date. Normally I send the paperwork before I get there. When I get there, they usually just call a name and say the case is dismissed. But the times they don't, they call my name, Alexander West, case, blah, 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 blah. And then they tell you to step up, blah, 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 right? I say, for the record, what I just told y'all I say, right? I say for the record, exactly what I told y'all I just say. I say for the record, Your Honor, I do not consent to jurisdiction. I am here in proper persona and not per se, and I waive no rights. I am the living beneficiaries of executor of the trustee and the stakes of the name of this matter. I am not the all capital entity. Let the record show that there is no verified complainant, right? Injured party presented in this subject matter. So no injured party equal no jurisdiction. And as executor and granted, I administratively reject and assume liability I do not consent to concerning this personal surety that I represent. And if there's no claimant or no contract that exists, I motion this subject matter to be dismissed for failure to state claims where release can be granted, right? So the judge gonna ask the prosecutor, gonna look at the prosecutor and say, what does the state have to say, right? Because you got to give her a chance to rebuttal, see what she got to say after what I say, right? So if he, well, Your Honor, I say he should be this or she should be that, and he should be given 10 years, and he should be given this side of the case is, right? So after they state their claim, then the judge gonna ask you. So what did you say in response to what the state reply is, right? So this is what I did. Whatever the state said, it don't matter what the case was, whether it was about guns, it was about drugs, it was irrelevant. I never even repeated, I never even brought it up. I act like it never exists, right? Because it didn't exist. So what I said in response to that, I said, Your Honor, I said, unless the state was there or have first-hand knowledge, I do not consent to he or she, right, being a witness to this subject matter containing this hearing, and anything he or she say from this moment on, I is content, and I demand that they be locked up. I do not give them permission to speak concerning the subject matter on this hearing, unless they got first-hand knowledge if they was there. So the judge gonna look at the state attorney, because the judge gonna know that the state attorney is in checkmate, right? So because they always working together, but they do it secretly, right? And they rely on our ignorance, right? So the judge probably, matter of fact, the judge says something like, so what you got to say concern the police saying that they took this from you, they found this on you, whatever the case was, whether it's guns, drugs, it don't matter what it was, the mass, it doesn't matter, traffic. So the first thing I'm going to say, because I see now that the judge is violating his open office and it's openly working with the state attorney, right? So to put the judge back in check, what I would say, Your Honor, is this a state of law? The judge said, yes, it is. I said, Your Honor, acting on this open office today? Judge will say, yes, I am. So next thing I would say, well, Your Honor, with that said, then, are you arguing on behalf of the state, Your Honor? Now that's checkmate. Because if the judge say yes, they arguing on behalf of the state attorney, what they actually saying is they violate their open office, because the judge is impartial, right? And their job is just to make sure everything in court is everybody. They violate their open office because the judge is impartial, right? And their job is just to make sure everything in court is everybody is being treated fair on both sides, and nobody is breaking the law. See, that's checkmate. So the next thing the judge to do is dismiss the case. And most of the times, what they do, because a lot of times the courtrooms be crowded, a lot of times what they'll do, they'll call a recess, right? They'll tell you, wait till like the whole court over with. And they'll make your case before the judge decides what he's going to do. Most of the times when I'm in court, or when I was in the court, they'll wait till the court over with, and then they'll call me back in there. And then they'll say, well, the case is dismissed. The reason why they does it, see, because they don't want me, or peoples like me, right, to wake up everybody else, right? Because if everybody else knew what I know, then if they start doing what I'm doing, right, and then the courts don't make no money, right? If they don't make no money, then they can't stay in business, right? Because it's all about business. You get what I mean? So I can give you another example. Like if you got a ticket or something, right? And you go into court like for traffic, for tickets, right? A lot of people don't know that when you're dealing with tickets or anything got to do with Federal Reserve notes, negotiable instruments, what they call money or fines or whatever, right? It's usually dealing with civil, right? So the first thing you should know, why would they be dealing with you why would they have a civil matter? Why would they be dealing with you why would they have a civil matter, dealing with a civil matter in a criminal court? That's the first thing that you will want to know. So when you go in front of the judge for a ticket, right? First thing you want to ask the judge. You want to ask the judge, Your Honor, for the worker, is this a court of law? They're gonna say yes. Gonna say so therefore, is this a court of law? It's not a court of equity. It's not a court of equity, right? You're gonna say correct. So you're gonna read off the ticket where it's telling you it's dealing with civil and equity, right? So you're gonna say, well then, how do we go forward with this subject matter? Because according to you, this is a court of law, and according to the contract that I didn't consent to, it's dealing with civil. So with that said, I motion that this ticket be thrown out. Now